he says that he loves being a podcaster, an MC, an anchor, um, and he uses his broadcast skills to the fullest. And I don't think that we could have got anyone better than Shivraj to do this session for all of us. And I am really, really, really very fond of Shivraj and his skills. And Shivraj, all the best.
Thank you, Riti, but I'm not going to let you go that easily. So just a couple of questions, because as you're a fellow journalist, you know that as journalists, we can't let anyone go without probing. Do you like podcasts?
Well, for me, Shivraj, podcast is my, yes, I do love podcasts because it's catching up very fast. However, for me, podcast is my escape from real life.
Hmm.
And you know why? Because it's an escape for me from seeing visuals that I don't want to see.
Exactly.
Someone tells me a story and I want to see what I want to see, what my mind wants to see. And that's what podcast makes me do. And I think that's the best answer I can give you,
Yeah,
that
it's very evocative.
yes.
And ironic that we're doing the session today because Indian Startup Stories has just released its episode with Kaushik.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That was the first stint with podcasts of Ireland.
So
Well,
I'm hoping
anyway.
Reeti Sinha will be on my Live and Learn podcast someday soon.
I'm not sure. I can just go for a small break and come.
I'm going to let you go on that break because I've got lots and lots to
Sure.
cover. Thank you so much for that
Thank you.
introduction. And I'm super excited that you've decided to consider podcasting, all of you, because today I want to share with you all that I know about podcasting. I don't know about you, but I'm very excited about podcasts. Been doing them for over a decade, mainly for clients. And last year during the lockdown, when I decided I would do them for myself, I suddenly discovered there was new information, there were new tools, and there's an entire thriving ecosystem. So, quite honestly, there's a huge amount of information out there, and it can be really overwhelming. So, in the next couple of hours, what I'm going to try and do is give you as much as I can without overwhelming you. And I've been in the broadcasting business for nearly 3 decades. So I can talk, I can talk, I can talk. But the only way I'll know if you're getting what you want from the session is if you could interject, interrupt, ask questions. And there'll be moments when I will have a few technical switchovers and just throw in a comment or anything, and I won't be thrown. So are you all ready? Yeah. So today I'm going to be doing mainly three things. Understand what are podcasts, how they began, and helping you find podcasts that speak to you. Also, what potential they may have, leading to how you can start one of your own. Here I give you 8 quick tips. And this is a video I did for an event once before where I'll help you get primed to launch your own podcast. And you'll see that while it appears complicated, it's actually very simple. And if you don't have the bandwidth to start your own podcast, how can you build your own brand being a guest on someone else's podcast? So, Riti, I will hold you to that for sure. Okay, how about everyone coming on video? Because remember the publicity material, I said you should be getting your headphones on. So, can I have a quick look? Headphones. I'm being police monitor, everything. Have you got your headphones on? Because we're going to be listening to a lot of clips. So I hope you can hear it nicely. I'm spying on all of you and your videos are off. But put your videos on and get your headphones together because we're going to be doing a bit of me talking and you listening to interesting clips as well. Ready? Okay. Now, as a broadcaster, I cannot really go to the next level until I've understood, and as a trainer, what all you want from this session, right? So I'm going to ask you all to whip out your phones, right? And get ready. But I have a caveat, folks, because I know a lot of people do podcasts on video. They go onto YouTube and they call them podcasts. For today's purpose, I'm going to look only at the audio format because I'm a podcast purist. And I will tell you why in a bit. And I think Riti very astutely also alluded to that. And I can't proceed until I know what all you want from the session. So I'm just going to switch over. Can you still see the screen? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Okay then. So bear with me a few seconds. Right. What do you see on your screen? Do you see
We still see.
menti.com? So if you could,
No,
on your
no, no.
phones, on your,
Shiv, we're
yeah?
only seeing your PPT.
So how do I stop share? And then I share screen again. Okay. So I'll have to do that multiple times. All right. Do you see that now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you could whip out your phones and on your browsers, go to menti.com. Use the code 13956122. Hopefully that's on your screen if you can see that. Yeah. And the three bits that I'm asking you is, what are you keen on knowing about podcasts? Where do I listen to
Can you
them?
repeat? Can you repeat the
Code
number?
is 13956122.
What's the name of the website? Can you repeat?
Menti.com. So it's on, if you see that top bit of the screen,
Okay, Menti.
www.menti.com, and the code is 13956122. Got it? And there should be three questions. Okay, I can see some results coming in. Come on, come on, come on, everyone. Nimble fingers, otherwise we'll go into 3 hours now. Nice. Ah. Okay, it's evolving, but what I'm seeing from the trends on the poll is a large number of people are very keen on starting their own podcast, right? So I think that's great because I'm going to give you 8 tips, and we're even, Stephen, on where you want to listen to them, the basics, and being a guest. And I'm going to stop sharing and move to my PPT. So if you could just allow me a few seconds as I get back to my presentation. There. So can you see that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, then. Let's go to the central question. So, what is a podcast? Before you go there, let me tell you a little story. And as Riti said, I love telling stories about my brush with the audio format and audio storytelling. So, way back in 2001, I took a mid career break from NDTV to do a master's in international affairs at the sorry, it's gone a little crazy. University of Sussex. And, in the UK, the problem is that you don't just buy a TV set and watch TV. You have to pay a very hefty license fee. So as students, we couldn't afford television. So I had a radio set. And does anyone remember what happened on the 13th of December in 2001? Anyone?
Parliament attack, India?
Absolutely. And I woke up in the morning, my time there, and Jill McGivering, who was the bureau chief of South Asia for the BBC, on Radio 4. And that's where I got hooked onto Radio 4. And Radio 4 is amazing current affairs and documentary long format programs, which I got hooked onto. But listening to her, listening to the sounds, listening to her tell the story evoked a whole different kind of feeling. So what is a podcast? Ignore what's written there for now. I think, well, yes, some trivia. Ben Hammersley, who's a British technologist, a future journalist, a strategist, coined the term podcast. And it became a word, a big word in the New Oxford American Dictionary in 2005. So technically, he called it an episodic series of spoken word, digital audio files that anyone can download. And it provides a convenient, integrated way to manage personal consumption across sources and devices. And he goes on to talk about how they combine elaborate and artistic sound and production, and you can have, website links, show notes, guest biographies. It could be a single host, multiple host. They're free to download. Some of them from big corporations come with commercial advertisements. And there's a whole host of things. But if you want a really simple breakdown of what podcasts are, well, they're simply radio on demand, right? So unlike traditional media or traditional radio where you have to wait for a scheduled niche content to come up according to the radio station schedule. Here, you go and select for yourself from a whole host of sources. And we'll get to that in just a bit, right? Now, if you look at podcasts and their potential, so these are figures from only 2018. What makes them so great? I think Riti pointed out in our conversation earlier, they build a genuine connection with the audience. So instead of this fractured or limited connection where with either blog posts or videos, you have to stop, you have to read, you have to watch the video, podcasts allows you to engage with your audience unlike any other long form content. So folks can listen to podcasts while driving, while working out, taking work breaks, doing household chores, anything. And it's really a very unexplored space. If you just look at the figures on screen, I'm not going to read them, but look at the potential. For every podcast, there are 750 blogs and 29 YouTube channels. So right now, podcasting is massive, right? Now, I'm going to make you work again. So pull out your phones again, because I want you to really look at what interests you. But before we get there, quick question. Does anybody know, since 2018, with the lockdown in between, and now in 2021, as of April 2021, how many podcasts there are? Any guesses from 850,000?
1,000?
They've doubled.
2 million podcasts with 48 million episodes out there.
Oh my God.
So can you imagine the spread of what you've got? So again, I'm going to have to do this switch over if you will just humor me. And I will stop share because I want you to go back to telling me what excites you about podcasts. This time, I have a different question. And I want you to answer for me. When you go online, when you watch videos, when you look for content, what are the subjects that you're really interested in? You can put in up to 3, same menti.com, but the code is different. It's 2583414 on your screen. Put in subjects that interest you. Anything, absolutely anything. Could even be cockroaches, anything. Humanity. Even the most obscure stuff, not just mainstream, anything. Fill up my screen, come on.
Amazing.
Just look at that. Look at the spread.
Wow.
Yeah? So you can well imagine with all the niches and micro niches that you're popping up on my screen and the kind of subjects you said interest you, I think, and I'm going to put my money on this, if you just search, you will find a podcast that speaks to you. Yeah? Lovely. Look at it. Look at, wow. More. That's fabulous. Lovely. So with your permission, can I go back to the next thing? Yeah? Great. Now I'm going to go back to... Now here I want you... See, I'm making you work. I want you to... Oh dear. Sorry, excuse me. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I want you to get your headphones ready. And I'm going to play a little quiz game with the audio tracks. And a lot of them are giveaways. But I want you to listen and tell me what genre each one is. So we start with the head. And let me get you the audio playing on my system.
You leave your nature to serve your culture. And what that does is it splits you in two. So you're no longer in integrity, you're in duplicity. But you don't actually even know it with the conscious mind. You feel it in the heart, you feel it in the body and the soul, but the mind is clueless.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the #1 health podcast in the...
Okay, I know you got a bit of the signature, but what kind of podcast was that?
Health, psychology,
Mental health?
Spirituality.
philosophy.
Health?
It was a health and coaching podcast. And I will tell you who it is from. So I'm going to take you to the next one, right? And this is boring, but I'm going to subject you to it.
Good afternoon. This is All India Radio. I'm Anubha Rohatgi, and with me is Reshma Tiwari with the Midday News.
That's just a little clip. I'm not going to play more than that. What was that? What genre?
News.
Absolutely. That was news. And now I'm going to play the last one, which is one of my favorite podcasts. So listen, I'm going to play a lot of it.
So Good Morning India was India's first breakfast show, right, which was conceived by Dr. Prannoy Roy himself. Richard Branson was quite an interesting character, actually. I remember sitting in the office, I was wanting to meet Dr. Roy for some work, and in walked Branson, okay? I looked at him, and I just got up and I said, "Hello, Mr. Branson." And he just turned around and said, "Hello, young man, how are you?" And we stood there and we shook hands. And I said, "First time in India?" He said, "No, I've been very often to India." I said, "Excellent. I've been here a while too myself."
Biker radio broadcast advises safety at all times, discourages underage riding, but celebrates the spirit of motorcycling. And how?
Tango Charlie, Green Tea, 515, coming to you, Green Tea. Good morning, Tango Charlie, this is Easy Peter, Green Tea 515. I'm ready to roll. See you in 5 at the DND Bay. Over and out.
Okay, did you guess the genre of that podcast? Confusing, right? Because that is actually a motorbiking podcast, if you please. It's a podcast where he speaks to bikers across the spectrum. So bikers, while they may have something in common, they come from different professions, but they all have this singular quality of being lone rangers, but having very interesting stories. Now, I think the affinity for podcasts can be attributed to many reasons. First, listeners want to be told a story, right? And podcasting is a fabulous medium. So if you heard the intro to that podcast, the kind of music and the different tunes, right? And there's a whole spectrum. There's the interesting coaching one, there's the boring All India Radio, and then you have this really snazzy mobile podcast. Secondly, listeners want to learn something new, and podcasts do offer those insights. In fact, Spotify's 2020 new report states that 86% of Indian parents who listen to podcasts feel that the medium has become a very helpful educational tool. Meenal? Yeah. Additionally, 60% of millennials and Gen Z have accepted podcasts because they've become a mode of self-discovery, especially during this lockdown. And this goes to show India's growing acceptance of the medium, right? Now, if you look at my podcast playlist, it's very, very, very varied. So the first one you heard was, the clip you heard was On Purpose with Jay Shetty. So he is, anyone know Jay Shetty?
Yes, I always listen to him.
Yeah.
But mostly his YouTube videos.
Yeah. So his podcast is conversations with very interesting folks on a range of issues, but all connected to health and mindfulness, right? And then Goop. Goop is Gwyneth Paltrow's brand, and she again talks to very interesting people, and she's very quirky. But if you ask me my most listened to, no surprises, the first one is the Training Business Podcast with Market Garrett Hayes. Now, this is a podcast for people like us, freelance trainers, training business owners, learning development professionals. And what I love about Mark is that he's a trainer trained at Walt Disney, and so he's very visual, and he gives you really interesting tips. So one of the tips I learned from one of his episodes was how to write a one-page training proposal. Someone's audio's on. Could you please mute your sound? Yeah, thanks. The other one that I really like is The Will to Change by Jennifer Brown. So she believes everyone has a diversity story or a challenge, even those who you don't expect. So she grills best-selling authors, CEOs about diversity inclusion and their brush with it. No surprises, stories and strategies, PR professionals, Doug Downs takes you deep. In fact, his latest episode is about being a guest on a podcast. This one is my favorite, Truth About Nobody, is my friend Preeti Singh. She just survived a death-defying syndrome called Guillain-Barré syndrome, where one day in Vietnam during a holiday assistant, she was on a boat and she got paralyzed completely. And she's a journalist and she's very vocal like me. And when she was in hospital and getting her senses back, her muscle memory had gone. She started podcasting. So it's her story with her condition, which is a very rare one, but it can be deadly. And then it goes to online dating and some very raunchy stuff. And I'm on one of the episodes on that. The one that you heard, the one with Sharat Sharma talking about Good Morning India and then Akashvani and all the mix, that's the Rodcast Biker Radio. And it's with Shandy. And I met Shandy at an international podcasting festival. And what's amazing is he gets these really iconic stories out of members of the community of bikers, men and women, right? And then there is this really amazing Indian podcast called The Seen and the Unseen. It's a weekly podcast by Amit Verma. And it started looking at unintended consequences of public policy and goes into really quirky ways of looking at Gandhi's philosophy, the emergency, and very current issues, but from a different perspective. If you're a Ravish Kumar fan, then Amit Verma is definitely for you. So where do you find podcasts? So, a survey recently found that most people listen to podcasts on podcast directories, right? So what are podcast directories? Very simply, they are these things. There's Apple Podcasts, there's Spotify, Google Podcasts, and now Amazon Music has also got podcasts. So what it does is that if you're on the go and you look Alexa and you can get it on your Echo, the Indian ones, Ghana, JioSaavn, and there's one called Kuku FM, which I discovered because they scrapped me on Instagram and they're in tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? And they cater to the Telugu, Tamil, local language. It's incredible the kind of reach they have in tier 2 and tier 3. So you can imagine that podcasting isn't about just being good in English, right? Now, how many of you know about Goodreads, if you're readers of books?
Yes, me.
Yeah? What does Goodreads do?
Gives book reviews. I mean, the readers give reviews and also allows them to do promotion, authors.
And you also have a competition, how many books you've read and where to find books, and there's like communities, right? Podcasts have good pods. So if you're really upset and you really don't want to go to Apple, you don't want to go to Spotify, you don't want to go to all these, just go to Good Pods, and it aggregates all the podcasts that are currently out there that are exciting and that have both global and local reach. But this is more international. So Kuku FM is really devotional stuff and really local stuff that you would not see. So are you ready to learn the 8 steps to how to start your own podcast? Yeah? So podcasts are as varied as the people that create them, as well as the people who listen to them. So you saw that word cloud, right, of all the subjects. But before you develop your podcast concept, and this is something we all did in our training coaching program, is ask yourself 2 fundamental questions. Why am I starting a podcast? And what is my podcast about? Right? Simple. Once you've answered the why and what, the rest of the concepts will fall in place. So the why could range from to generate leads for my business, to be recognized as a leader in the industry, to sharing an important message, to just having fun, right? Only then can you really pick a podcast theme or topic and also name it, right? So appealing to a smaller audience with a niche topic might seem like it's counterintuitive, like you're hurting your chances, but believe me, in the podcasting world, you have to be really micro niche. You have to identify that audience that's loyal to you and stick with it, because that's where you'll have the most fun. And I'll show you how you can have the most fun as well. Now, finding the right name for your podcast, that's very important. But before we go there, how do you respond when someone asks you what your podcast is about? Are you going to be vague, or are you going to nail it down? So that's why I said those fundamental questions of why and what are very important. Who is your podcast for? What kind of person is going to listen to it? Grab a pen and paper, brainstorm, think about who you're really serving. What is the main subject of your podcast, right? If someone else were to describe a podcast, what would they say? And how are you different or unique? These are questions you really need to ask yourself before you come to naming a podcast. Don't be too clever. But here are some tips to help you cross the finish line and land on the name that you love. Your name should reflect the content. When someone sees your podcast name or show title, they should immediately know what they are going to listen to, right? So let's try this. When you see these, what comes to mind? What are these podcasts about?
I think the first one talks about some talk show. The second one relates to some science fiction. And the third one may be related to some sports.
So all three are linked to science fiction.
All three sci-fi.
Star Wars. So if any of you know Star Wars, so because Ruchi podcasts are so niche that there'll be someone who'll only talk about Coffee with Kenobi, right? Or the Rebel Force. But it's all linked. It's all to do with Star Wars, but you've got a cult, right? So you can create mini cults as well. Remember that if you're also trying to promote your personal brand, you can also use this kind of name, right? Where you have your name prominently on the show, and then you have somewhat of a tone that comes through. And your name should be unique. Don't be too clever or too quirky. Be very simple. In fact, right now I was just having a conversation with a client who I'm helping do their podcast, and they had this very quirky cover and a quirky name. I'm like, no, you've got to be standout, simple, because you've got 2 million podcasts, right? So if you've got serious podcasts, so these are serious business podcasts. But one thing I would ask you to be very, very careful of is not coming up with the name that someone else has used, because you don't want to be held liable, right? You don't want to get their cease and desist letter. So do a search online for podcast names. See you're not lifting it up from anywhere else, and there you go, right? 2, choosing your format. What do you mean by format? What is the podcast program going to look like, right? Ask yourself, will it be a single host? That's you. Will it be scripted stories? You could even do that. Or are you going to be a podcast that does feature in-depth interviews, which is what I like doing because it's where I'm the most comfortable with. When it comes to podcast formats, I think there isn't one right answer. Choose the one that you feel most comfortable with, right? So here are some podcast formats. Each has a slightly different structure. And before you decide on a format, ask yourself these questions to make sure you choose a style that is sustainable and you can continue doing, right? So if you look at what the theme or genre is, how you distinct, you're going to have segments, is going to be very complicated. So the easy one is the monologue, right? All you do is have a script and read through. And it's great when you're doing podcasts for self-help, for spiritual, comedy, music, arts. Then you can maybe move to more, podcasts that have a guest or expert that helps you actually get more variety and more content, right? You can even have a round table, but that's really complicated because you've got multiple people. You don't know whether you can get them all at the same time. Gaming, technology, long form podcasts that talk about issues. Those are the kind of podcasts that use this. If you want to have a narrative, which is a monologue, it could be a serial, it could be a comedy show, you can do that. You can also have a documentary, but that's got very heavy production, right? It's what I really got hooked on to, the documentary BBC style. How long should your podcast be? That's also a trick question. You've got to consider many factors. How long do you want it to be? Could it be between 5 minutes to 60 minutes? And look at the TSL. That's the time spent listening. You see, as it gets longer, fewer people stick around till the end, right? It really depends on your audience, how much you can engage with them, how often do you publish. So if you're publishing weekly, I would say 15 minutes to 60, but I would say 20 minutes. And that's where the attention span ends. But a quick pro tip. Now listen to this very carefully. A podcast can take 6 or 8 times the length of a podcast to create. So production, right, on a podcast is 6 or 8 times the effort. So you have to ask yourself, am I going to invest so much time in my podcast? Now, this is where it gets interesting, and I'm not going to get very technical because it can be, there's a lot out there. I'm going to make it very simple. Podcasts have a low barrier to entry. If you want to start a podcast, very simple to begin a process with little experience. You can start recording with just your phone and a pair of headphones, right? Remember, your content is the most crucial part. Nobody listens to podcasts because they have superior sound quality. Of course, you have to take a little care of that, but people will put up with less than optimal sound quality if your content is fabulous, right? So simply put, it would be made easier for you by, like I said, the ecosystem. So Spotify bought over this fabulous app, which you can get on your phone called Anchor, and it helps you do it all in one window, right? And if you want more control, you want to enhance your quality, control freak, you can invest in a USB mic and put it into your laptop and begin recording. And you don't have to go very far. You record on your laptop on any of these 3 editing software options. Once you've recorded your podcast, you can use these to edit, because very often if you try and edit on your phone, the screen's really small, right? And be very difficult. So let me take you through these 3. My favorite, which I use, is Audacity. It's open source, which means you can use the code any which way. It's free, but it's a little bit of a learning curve because people like me in broadcasting who've had to edit ourselves, we can do it. But there are a lot of video and online tutorials. Then there's one that comes with iOS, which is GarageBand. Then there's the one that is really very good for podcasts, but it's expensive. It's $95 plus. It's the Heidelberg Podcasters. It's for journalists use. So I would say 30-day trial and you're good to go, right? Okay, so what does it cost to be a podcaster, right? So picking the best podcasting setup can get very confusing. So what I've done is, if you don't have a background in audio recording, I'm going to make it easy for you by giving you 3 options, right? Depending on how many people are involved in the recording. So someone's on unmute.
Doctor, can you please go on unmute?
Dr. Susitra.
Okay, so when you look at your screen, the one with the mic stand underneath is the Audio Technica ATR 2100X. The one in the middle is the one that I'm using. That's the Samsung Q2U. And on top of that is the foam ball, right? Can you see it? Yeah. And then if you want to get a little more complicated and have multiple channels going in, you've got the Focusrite. And then you've got this fabulous thing right on top there, which is the Zoom H6, which a lot of broadcasters use because you can put multiple touch points. So let me give you an option of what it costs to do different types. You can even do it free, like I said earlier. So 1-person package where you've got one of each without the mixers. So just the foam ball and the mic. 2-person package where you bring in the Focusrite, and the 3-person one, or 4 persons involved. But you know what? It's very simple. You don't need to get caught up in all this, because in today's long distance scenario where we're all virtual, you can just as easily get online and record with people long distance, right? But I would say try and avoid doing a podcast on Zoom, Skype, or Google Meet, because they are free to use and everybody's on it and there's bandwidth issues. I use more dedicated recording software called Zencaster. There's also other options like Spotcast. What's amazing is they give you these links where you send to your guest, and when they click in, you both meet each other and you click record, and you could record audio, record video, and it's fabulous broadcast quality. Now, this is where the rubber really meets the road, because it's where editing gets you down when you start podcasts, right? So potential podcasters get very excited. You record and then you're like, oops, what do I do with this? So you get very easily caught up in the idea of recording your podcast, right? But it gets technical. Remember, even the best podcasts have started with a few bad episodes. Please don't listen to the first episode of my first season last year, The Brevis Live and Learning. It's with a psychologist. It was so bad, considering I'm a broadcaster, because she decided she wanted to come on Zoom. And it was really, really bad. But the content was good. People listened to it. She obviously had a following. So how do you really make it simple? And here's where I'm going to give you some tips, right? The most important thing is to avoid rambling. So make a quick podcast outline. I'm not saying write the whole thing out. Just take 15 minutes and jot down pointers. It's like a pay chart, right? Where you've got your pointers. And if you have a guest, send them questions in advance, so everyone's prepared. And when you begin recording, it's more or less seamless and you're not worried about too much editing. Make sense? Remember structure. Like every good story, podcasts have a beginning, a middle, and an end. What do you see on your screen?
Intro, outro.
What is it that's in the middle?
Outro.
No, so they're bookends, right?
Bookends. Yeah.
So the intro and outro, if you look at podcast structure, are like bookends. So the intro is really about signature music that is the brand of your podcast. You're introducing what your podcast is about, then your guest, you draw in listeners, then you begin the interview or your narrative or your segments, and then you end and you thank everyone and you give them a call to action. Go listen to us, email me, send me a voicemail, review, participate. So they're like bookends. They really hold your podcast together. They're very important. So that essentially is structure. But you can also add some music, right? To give yourself a theme song. Now, if you decide to do an intro, you probably want to get some intro music, right? So the first 5 seconds begins with music and then you have some narrative. You can look for royalty-free music. There are a lot of sources out there. I rip off music from YouTube. I look at royalty-free, copyright-free. So I'm covered. But more often than not, a lot of podcasters will have the same music. So you go to some royalty-free sites like Audio Jungle, Premium Beat, Audio Blocks, and buy a track. And then you can use that as and when you feel like, right? So it's very important that you do this structure. I'll tell you why. Because even in the 21st century, there's a tendency of you and me when we're listening to podcasts to tuning out, right? In long structures, if it's not structured and it's a lot of information. So it's very important to keep your audience engaged with some structure. So you section off your show dedicated to a topic or an activity, very similar to a radio show, and you structure with segments. And I'll take you through exactly what I mean. So if you look at it, virtually every podcast episode has 3 main segments. Like I said earlier, an intro, your main content, and your outro, right? Adding more segments in the basic structure isn't normally required, but if you want to be really kind of super innovative, you could do that, but you sometimes have just one continuous conversation. And very often it evolves. So you look at where your listeners drop off in the stats. You have a show that covers various topics. You can have different bits. If you feel you need to break up content, like a Pecha Kucha, you could do that. If you want to make it more interactive and dynamic, and I'll take you through those options, so don't worry. So here are tips for better segments, right? Remember to target audience. Remember, you have to stay relevant and create transitions. So I'm going to give you a few audio clips to listen to. This is an audio clip where you shine a spotlight on another podcast or a standout company or someone who's influenced you. So basically, it's just about making a mention. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to play that back for you to get a sense. Ready?
Thompson, what is making you happy this week, buddy?
Well, over the Thanksgiving weekend, the span of about 5 days, my family and I drove about 2,300 miles. And during that long stretch through terrible weather coming home, we all got so tired and reached a point of exhaustion where it was pretty much impossible for us to banter cheerfully the way we like to as a family on road trips. So we turned, as my son recommended, to the podcast My Brother, and Me.
Oh, nice.
Now, Glenn, you have, I think, recommended My Brother, and Me on many times, including on this show. Mm-hmm. It is on the Maximum Fun Network. It stars brothers Griffin, Travis, and Justin McElroy. It is ostensibly an advice podcast, but is mostly these 3 nice, funny guys goofing around.
So you see what they're doing there. They've got a little section in the podcast where the guy is talking about something that's noteworthy and mentionable. Then you could even have podcasts where you throw in some listener voicemail, right? Feature short interviews or voicemail that your listeners have left behind, a testimonial. It just empowers people to want to share it further. So I'm going to give you a listen in to a similar kind of podcast where you have listeners who drive the content, right?
In today's episode, you'll learn what it takes to get to Apple Podcasts' new and noteworthy section. Welcome to Podcasting Q&A, where you learn the best tips and strategies to launch, grow, and monetize your podcast. This week's question comes from Megan.
Our podcast is called Wild Healers, and we are growing at a very rapid rate, having only been around for a month. But I'm noticing that all the new and noteworthy podcasts for Apple.
So that's a podcast where you've got someone calling in. Then you can even add in games and trivia, right? So here's a clip of how one podcast did exactly that. It was like a live show almost. And there was an improv segment, right? So let's listen in.
Answer. Based on time here, what I want to do is switch over to our lightning round questions, just 5 quick questions that you could answer with the best first thought that comes to mind. You want to get started?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, you're going to do great. What advice would you give for early stage SaaS companies starting marketing today?
So I think the one thing I would say is actually get out of the building. Don't spend too much time sitting in a meeting room with your team trying to figure out what your customers want, but actually go out and talk to those customers. And I think if I started a SaaS company myself today, I would start it from an audience segment rather than a product. I would figure out who I want to build for before I figure out what I want to build.
Looking back on our own journey.
So you see what they're doing there, in the middle of a conversation, you just mix it up a bit and you add some trivia. The other thing is you can do a Q&A as well in your podcast where you're just basically trying to engage with more of your audience and you're soliciting questions and answers. So here's another sample.
Hi friends, it's Sarah May, and today I'm doing a record from home, and this is an audience Q&A, and it's for Holly and Ashley. And so this is about how to know whether or not you can trust yourself and how to stop focusing on the expectations of others if you're in a relationship. Or if you're in I guess it's for anybody. So the first one is basically for a person who is perfectionistic and pretty hard on themselves and can't trust themselves because they know they're not always right. So that kind of sends this person into an anxiety and fear spiral where you feel like you can't trust your gut and you question everything you do, basically. So this is for somebody that is trying to figure out if they should do something or shouldn't do something, and they get trapped in that kind of thought loop, second guessing everything they do.
So that again is a nice way of segueing into getting more. So coaches like us could use that, right? Where you actually bring in questions and answers you've heard, and then you refer to it. And then there are the tips and tricks. That's the business all of us on right now are in, right? We're in the business of giving tips because we want to get leads. So you do that in podcasts, and I do that a lot in mine.
Advice, or maybe I'm just saying that
any tips you have as well. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know with our courses that's why we've always started off by saying, what is your why? Why did you actually start a podcast? Because you have to keep that in front of you. I know I'll use my piano as the example of me quitting something. For me, I had no why. The why was when I was little, my grandmother wanted to teach me piano, and then my mom really wanted me to be musically inclined, and I had no why. And so the minute that it got difficult, all I did was try to avoid it. And so it didn't work. And if podcasting, the only thing you want is to be really big and famous, the minute that you see that's not really working out, you're going to quit. But if your why is, I really love Marvel comics or something, and you're just talking about Marvel comics all the time, it won't really matter if it's this tough part where only 20 people are listening, because you're going to go, I love them so much. I'm happy to talk about them to these 20 people. And if it grows, it grows. If not, it doesn't. So you really got to have that passion and that really believing there's something you really want to do with this podcast, and keep that why in front of you.
You see what I just did there? It's also great because you can also refer to your fans who are tweeting, or you can ask them to use hashtags and tweet you, right? So here's a podcast where it's a party podcast. So of course it's more sort of young people, and I'm just moving it to the point where she
Monday, December 16th. Did you have fun? Share it with all your friends with a screenshot of this episode. The more, the merrier. Tag @BrandPartyPodcast and hashtag BrandPartyPodcast on Instagram to continue this after party.
Yeah? Or simply do what all of us on this session do very well. Tell a story and engage your particular audience with that story. Make sense? Now, you begin recording your podcast. Now, it's all very well when you're singing in the shower, right? You have echo and things. But when you're doing a podcast, you've got to also be privy to what people want to listen to. So I think the most important thing is when you're recording, make sure you have things around you. So if you look behind me, I have books, I have a lot of padding to prevent sound bouncing off too much. So it's clear, it's clean, right? You buy the right headphones and editing software, and then you won't spend so much time on your edit just trying to rescue the sound or hiring an editor to mix it and make it better, right? The other thing is microphone technique, right? And I think a lot of us who are voice coaches will know this. How you position yourself in the microphone while recording is very important. You've got to prevent the sounds, right? So you've got to be about 2 or 4 inches away. And you notice how the clarity of my voice gets better, doesn't it? And when I want to get the lows out there without being too obvious, I can move away. And it's really about testing the angles that sound good on your headphone when you hit record. Make sense? Yeah? That's why when the other day Riti said, do your podcast voice, I couldn't because I was far away. Now, editing and uploading. Again, I love editing because I'm a broadcast person and we were forced to do that. But that's where the magic happens. That's where your segment, your podcast, your distractions like the ums and ahs, you put in your intro, your outro, your voiceovers, the music, and it helps to have the right software. But a few pointers, because I understand none of you are technically inclined. And I think the behind the scenes process that you put in will help you a lot. Don't get too caught up in getting a technically well-edited podcast out. If you want, you can reach out to people like me to help you. So are you ready to see how I can make it easy for you? I see Faisal has raised his hand. Okay, so I'm going to do a bit of self-promotion because I want you to hear some intros. Now, intros improve listener engagement and experience, but they aren't really required. It isn't your only option. You can just put in a little bit of music and intro, or if you want to be ambitious like me and be really annoying. So the first one I'm playing for you is my daily podcast last year called Good Morning Grammar. So it's a fun one. Humor me.
You're waking up with
me, Shivraj Parshad, your host on Good Morning Grammar. So you're with your cup...
Sorry. I have to stop that. Sorry. And now the second one, which was my weekly podcast, which is more conversation driven.
Hello and welcome to your weekend morning brew, a more languid, laid-back, slow-listening podcast with me, your host, Shivraj Parshad.
So, in essence, your podcast intro does different things depending on what your podcast is about, right? So, I am going to move. Sorry. Yeah. So, I think the most important thing about editing is when you record, and this gets a little technical, but if you see what the image on your screen is showing is when you record your speech, do it in a mono track, which is the single one. And when you have music, you can have it on stereo, right? When you have separate tracks, what you can do is you can adjust volume and cut those bits. And you don't have to worry. But if you record it all in one, can you imagine the kind of mishmash? It'll be very difficult to separate, and it'll be very difficult to take it to the next level and clean it up. The second thing, and this is very important, a lot of us, while we're listening to the podcast that we've recorded, will start removing the ums and ahs and the distraction, and by mistake, you'll remove a whole section. So first, when you listen to what you've recorded, just edit out from a content perspective first. So you've got your content right, then go back to improving it. Make sense? Was it too technical? Now, if you look at two tracks when they put together, like in the image here, if you don't fade them or cut them, they will merge into each other and there'll be a sound or there'll be a weird sound. So you've got to always try, and most softwares allow you to fade in and fade out. So put a fade out on the track that's ending and a fade in the track's beginning. And you have different layers. I wish I could show you, but it'll get very complicated, right? And when you're ready and exporting your podcast, it sounds a little technical, but most of your softwares will get this to you. Most podcasters use what is called the MP3 format. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And these are the two specs for the spoken word and music. And now that you have your final file, you're gonna find a way of uploading it, right, as the host. Which brings me to finally branding your podcast. You're ready to submit to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You're about to share the content you worked so hard to record and edit. And it's music to everyone's ears. But now you've got to put your best foot forward so that people see you, look for you, know who you are, right? Very simple tips on what you should focus on when you brand your podcast. So it's the podcast cover art. So if you go to Apple or anywhere, you'll see it, right? It's like a little emblem, like the playlist I showed you, right? New listeners will see it also on social media. So you've got to have 5 key things in mind, right? One is use your artwork to communicate the subject of your podcast. Design it to look good in different sizes, small thumbnails, big ones. Don't use too many words. So I've noticed a lot of people using too many words. What happens is when you share, you can't read it. Avoid using microphones and headsets in the images because those are overused. Unless, of course, your podcast is about podcasting. And make sure that your artwork is consistent with your brand. So your brand colors. So if you notice, I have yellow and blue in my brand. You see the little logo up there. And I normally keep my podcasts to that color scheme, right? Again, this gets a little technical, but it's very important. In fact, today I was just advising a client, but most platforms that allow you to upload and put images regularize it, but just for your information, it has to be a square image, and Apple Podcasts is the gold standard, and you've got to have it in either JPEG or PNG, right? I'm not going to get too technical. It just gets very confusing to everyone. And I think we all know that we're not designers, right? And Canva does it beautifully for you. You just have to find the right size and you put your image, you put your text, and it's ready for the internet. Now, a podcast is all about being searchable, right? What is the description of your podcast? How will people find it when they do a search? It's the name of your show. It's the description of your episode. It's the release year. Filling out these fields when you're uploading a podcast is very important, right? Make sure you're telling readers what's in it for them so that they can really click and play and look out for that. You can always go back and change the wording. Keep it to about a little half page. And more importantly, if you go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, they have categories, right? Coaching, business, politics. When you're uploading, choose a category for your podcast. And you can have up to 3 categories, but it's the first one most podcast directories pick up, right? So I've got a little technical and I feel like I'm losing everyone. So how do you get listed on these directories? This is where it gets interesting because actually Apple, Spotify and all are not where you go and create your magic. Where you create your magic to get listed is really elsewhere. They're called hosting platforms. In India, you've got 2 hosting platforms, Hubhopper and Cuckoo FM, right? What they do is they templatize your podcast. They create an RSS feed. They even give you marketing strategies to be able to go to every potential podcast directory. So Hubhopper will take you to Savan, Geo. Cuckoo FM will take you to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. There are also the international ones, and there's a whole host of them. I use Buzzsprout. So if you notice, a lot of my content is research, because what Buzzsprout does is it's an ecosystem. It gives you blogs, it gives you research, it allows you to make mini trailers of your podcast. It does everything. It even transcribes your podcast. Sometimes transcribing a podcast is useful because you can even have a blog that goes along with your podcast, right? And finally, wow, Shivraj is going to shut up. It's about marketing, right? Like I said, podcasts have a low barrier to entry, but you've also got to be very strategic about how you share your podcast. So a couple of pointers, and I realize that we are almost out of time, is the first thing is share your podcast with friends and family, right? So if you've got a couple of episodes in the bank, send them to friends and family and ask them to share further with other people, right? The second thing is post episodes on social media, where you essentially have little trailers, or you post the link from your platform and people get to see it and listen to it. And finally, partner with other influencers. Have guests on your show, share, search for blogs and influencers who speak on your behalf, invite them on your podcast. And I would say the ideal number of listeners for your podcast in maybe 6 months to a year is about 100 per podcast. It seems daunting, but if you're really having fun, like that clip said, you know your why, you're just having fun, you have a niche audience, you're ready to go. Yeah? You want me to continue to the exciting bit? How to be a guest. So a lot of people, and this is my business, I used to be a media trainer, say, getting onto popular media like radio and TV, it's very short-lived. I train people to make it pithy, short sound bites. On podcasts, it's the best long form to get your message out. So if you don't have the bandwidth, you don't want to invest your time and your mind space in editing and doing podcasts, you can get onto a podcast, right? And what the podcast does for you is it allows you to flesh out your story completely. But there's a rider to that. Everything in a podcast conversation is on the table, even your personal story. But if you master the art of storytelling and being able to bring the interview back like we all learned as coaches, this is a great medium to be on. So how are podcasts different from traditional media? Most podcasts are not really broken down into segments, unlike radio shows. So an interview can go from 20 to 45 minutes and the host will choose to play all of it, right? Again, podcasts address a niche audience. So if you know the podcast that you want to be on and the audience you speak to through your business, get onto that podcast. And podcasts also have a very specific niche audience. So what it is, it's all on-demand content, right? And in most conversations, especially in America, if you listen to some of the podcasts there's a very strong bond between the host and the audience. And therefore, you being on that podcast, you become part of this clan. And it's a great start, right? You position yourself, you get work, and you become relatable to your target audience. Yeah? So by that I mean is if you get onto a podcast, you can even be invited to have your own blog posts, public speaking engagements, appearances elsewhere. And the audio component of the podcast, unlike radio where people, when they're driving, switch stations, if you talk and that audio and you have something interesting to say, people will listen. So it makes it very relatable. So what are the 3 strategies to landing a guest appearance on a podcast? There are mainly 3, right? Podcasts reach out to you as a guest, or guests reach out, that is you proactively reach out to potential podcasts, or you're connected on third-party platforms. So let's look at the first strategy. It's the hardest to proactively prepare for a potential podcast guest. So podcasters are always looking out for guests. There's an easy way of doing it. Leave a note on a podcaster's social media profile, or be a doppelganger. So find coaches or people who talk about issues like yourself, go to the website, see where they've appeared on podcasts, and then reach out to those podcasts and say, I'm here. I'm unique. I have more marketability. I can even share with a wider audience. That's the best way to do it. The other thing is now on Facebook and in a lot of social media platforms, you have podcast communities. Go in there and say, this is my niche. Anyone want to talk to me, right? It's as simple as that. So here are 5 tips to ace that podcast interview. One, I think the most important thing is you've got to know the show you want to be on, right? Understand the show's tone, because you don't want to get onto a podcast talking about coaching, the person's pulling your leg. Find out what the style of the host is. Prepare yourself. Also prepare for some personal questions. So you're on the podcast and suddenly they'll be like, who were your influencers? Did your parents influence you? Did they do similar work? So you have to be prepared with messaging. Now, on regular media interviews, you're told deliver your message up front and leave it there. Here, you can continue bringing back the message, but being engaging and expanding your story. And don't try and sell yourself, because the moment you start selling yourself on a podcast, people get turned off. What you could do in advance is talk to the host about your business and your call to action and let them do it for you. Make sense? And before we sign off, a few final words. Make sure you have the proper recording space, tech gear, check with a host, which is the quickest and easiest way to connect with them, maybe calendar it. And when you're on air, pretend like you are really taking that seriously. And more importantly, as trainers and coaches, finally, practice makes perfect. So seek opportunities to appear on podcasts that align with your style, your message, your target audience. And the more you do it, the more confidence you gain, and the more podcasts and the more audiences you reach out to. Make sense? But I'm not going to let you go without doing some work. I don't want the last word. I would like you to do one last thing for me. Are you ready? Okay. Here's another poll, my God. Yes. So, the question I'm asking you is this, if it loads ever. Did you get all you want from podcasting? Yes? No? Ye dil mange mo. It's the same, menti.com with the code 315-12795 in my best podcasting voice. You can say no. I won't know who it is. Are you saying everyone dropped off? Shall I play some music while we do this? Let's listen to some music. And this time we're not going to be mellow, because we need to end on a high. Uh-oh. Okay. So I'm assuming 20 voted. So ye dil mange mo, which is exactly what I was hoping to hear, because may I stop sharing? Okay, then. 1 second. Sorry. So if you want, we can always have a chat, because now what I've done is I've actually made podcasting one of my offerings, which is fun because I get to talk to like-minded people and help them with their podcast. And if it's corporations, I charge them, not friends, and especially not friends of mine at ILA. So anytime you want to learn anything new, I'll also learn something new. That's my email. And now I'm going to stop sharing because I want you to grill me. Otherwise, I'll keep speaking. Any questions?
Hi, Shivraj. Saurabh here.
Hi, Saurabh.
Fantastic. It was really, really insightful. I really loved it. And
Thank you.
quite a few things I wanted to know. I have a question here. So I just randomly established my channel, Let's Speak Out, on Anchor. I haven't recorded any episode, but I heard Buzzsprout is also good. So do we get a similar kind of a platform or a subscription in Buzzsprout, or do we have to pay for it there to have our own channel and episodes podcast on Buzzsprout?
So, the problem with Buzzsprout as opposed to Anchor is that the free version allows you to have your audio on cloud for 90 days. And then it goes away. So I tried that initially, and then I moved to the paid one. And it's about $12 a month. I know it seems like a lot. And what I like about Buzzsprout is it's got a very interesting interface, and it keeps growing more offerings as the market demands it. But Anchor's very good. And now with Spotify buying over Anchor has really become deep, and they've actually acquired 30 or 40 local creators. So to be on Anchor, like my friend Preeti does it, she did it lying in her ICU bed. And so you can do it. And I think Anchor's a fabulous platform.
Yeah, Anchor's quite easy, actually. That's what I experienced.
And you can do it on your phone.
Yeah, true. Can we have the same podcast channel, on both the platforms parallelly, or we'll have to have a new one for Buzzsprout and another one for Anchor?
So the thing is that the platforms that you're on become your nodal point to feed your podcast to directories. So if you're on Anchor, you can't be on Buzzsprout because they generate an RSS feed. What you could do is you can migrate from any platform. I tried that. I migrated from Buzzsprout to Hubhopper because it was free. But the problem with Hubhopper, the Indian studio, is that it doesn't allow you to customize your episode art, which Anchor allows you. The only thing I think Anchor gives you a little watermark. That's the only problem.
Yeah, Anchor gives you a watermark.
Yeah, but it's lovely. Anchor's very good.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Shivraj.
Anytime. Any other questions?
Hi, Shivraj.
Hi.
This is Ami here.
Hi, Ami.
I've heard you on Good Morning Grammar, and it's an amazing show. It was really nice. Are you still doing it?
No, so last year, what happened? So it's a show that I was doing, getting other people to contribute.
Yeah.
And I think everyone ran out of steam. So by about episode 97, I got tired chasing people. And so I let it drop off. And in fact, I put on the last episode, I put out saying, if you want it, a new avatar, more contributors, no one responded. So I let it go. Then I moved to the weekend one, and now I moved to Live and Learn. And I realized as I'm also doing more podcasting that I've got to bring it closer to my brand, because all of us are now trying to get more work. So my latest season, Live and Learn, is really about Live and Learn. It's about speaking to interesting people in the area of what we do, or just life skills, or just generally interesting things. The last two episodes, again, I rehashed my Good Morning Grammar once because my guests didn't show up. In fact, there's a very famous trainer, soft skills trainer, who ditched me this week, so I don't have an episode. So next week I'm going to speak to someone else, and it's just fun. I mean, it's about talking to different people doing different things in the same sort of area.
I tried to reach you once for Good Morning Grammar,
but
somehow we couldn't connect. And a friend of mine, Suman Kher, she was doing.
I got her on one. And in fact, the story of Good Morning Grammar is very interesting. I was stuck after my first season, and I used to work for a PR firm where my CEO said, can you imagine we're in the business of communication and most people don't know how to proofread or do grammar? So I was, how as HR, so I was the leader of content, but I would send out one-liner, little invitation, verb, adverb, reminders every morning, and called it Good Morning Grammar. So the idea stuck. I said, why don't I do a podcast around it? And I got friends of mine to do it rather than me.
Okay. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Good to hear you. Very informative.
Hello.
Shiv.
Hi, Shiv.
Any other questions? Hi.
Shall I ask one question?
Absolutely, Reena.
It is, I don't know, it is very means a general question, but maybe for me, I don't know, maybe will be like that. So like in YouTube and all, when people make YouTube channel and all, so they'll get some amount, right? Some income they'll get, no? Like
monetization.
Monetization. So in podcast, it is just only for the promotion things or like that only?
No, so there's a whole science of monetization. The problem is that monetization from the way it is in the West to here, it's a whole different spectrum. So in India, we still don't have that habit because we still have the old ad rates and things. So they say you need to get 5,000 to 10,000 listeners on your podcast before you can go to an advertiser. What a lot of people do very interestingly is either you merchandise your brand and you sell it or via your podcast, or you basically align a podcast with your business and give tips and tricks. Or you do what I did. I made podcasting one of my businesses, and I'm now going to people and saying, you want a podcast? And I'll do it for you. And it's actually a very interesting, Reena, because last year when I was doing it, I came across a lot of people offering what is called podcast virtual assistants. So what they do is they go to people and say, if you're an overwhelmed brand or entrepreneur or business, I'll do the editing for you. Or I'll create the show notes. I'll manage your guests and coordinate. So, there's a whole host of things you can do. So that's one way you could do it. The other thing is, yes, if you can get people sponsor, if you're a known brand or people who appear on your show, co-promote with them, nothing like it. You have to be really innovative because abroad, like there are things called podcorn where you actually pitch your podcast to other people that advertise their businesses and they give you. So in podcasting, you have a pre-roll, mid-roll and post-roll. And each thing is about 15-20 seconds. It's like a radio thing. So a brand can give you that and you can play it out and charge them. But you have to have 5,000, 10,000 listeners before you have that critical mass. So monetization is, I'm very bad with arithmetic. So
it is just for promotion or we are just branding kind of thing.
No, you can monetize. You can actually, another thing people do is they hide their premium content of their podcast behind Patreon. Have you heard of Patreon? Which is the paid for thing. So what you do is you have episodes that go out to everyone and you say you want to listen to more premium content, more in depth of this episode, go to Patreon and put in 5 rupees. So you're crowdsourcing from your listeners. So you can do that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Shivraj.
Won't you need to have a lot of experience to start podcasting and also kind of have some kind of voice modulation? Because people like me, if I just go to like blah, 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 it'd be such a boring thing to hear.
The way you're speaking right now is fabulous. And if you're speaking to kids, you don't have to be voice modulated and special. You just have to be fun and talk in their way. So it's basically who your audience is and how you come to that level of speaking to them. So if you hear a lot of the famous podcasts in India, I'm sorry, I can't listen to many of them because maybe I'm an English purist, but some of them are really bad. The most famous podcast, he's done, in fact, I attended some of his masterclasses. I couldn't understand half the things he said, but he's very famous because he started out as a pharmacist who went to inspirational leaders and his podcast is now number 1. And I'm like, no, but he has an audience. He's big, I'm not.
Okay.
I think Shivraj, stories is a good way to start podcasting.
Very.
Like if I have been a part of Toastmasters for 2 years and I have a lot of stories. So if that's the way I want to start, will it be
fabulous? Because what stories do is that you engage the person, right? So we've done it in Toastmasters on public speaking and you just bring people in with a nice story. A lot of podcasts that do very well are storytelling ones in India. Because you can slip in a lesson. I mean, that's why the purpose of your story is kind of insidious and hidden. And horror stories, chick lit conversations, all of that is really picking up. And it's the stories that really, really... So I interview because it's the easiest format. I can't be bothered scripting. But if you're a storyteller, fabulous. You've got an edge over me any day.
So Shivraj, I have a question. Like we can do different things, but can we do travel blogging through podcast?
Absolutely. You can talk about, so again, it's about storytelling, but making it very visual.
Right.
The way that radio used to do it, where they actually described where they are and what they're thinking. The thing that would be nice is if you could even record or, lift sounds from different places and add that under your track. And so what that does is it evokes that feeling of being at a open air cafe in Paris, and you're having a macaron, and there's like what is that thing that they play? My brain's not working, and that's playing, and it just evokes different kinds of visuals. And what's great is, people listen to podcasts in the car, in the shower, wherever, and they can visualize it by just listening.
I think that's the beauty of a podcast.
I really got hooked onto audio that 2001. When I came back as a TV reporter, my technical editors used to throw me out because I'm like, no, I want some sound underneath. They're like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, no, I need it. And it really changes even the visualization on television. There's this thing where you have a crowd noise and then suddenly there's a night noise. And you just fade in the night noise before it comes to the visual. Just, it prepares you. So just audio is amazing, incredible. And another friend of mine, Richa Pant, went with me for a master's as well, and she just moved to radio. She didn't even come back to NDTV, and she and her husband were BBC for many years because the audio is just so powerful. You could just stand somewhere and pick up and speak to people and do it.
Super. Thank you.
Shiv, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
So you've talked about podcast formats, like you said, monologue or interview. So like your podcasts, are they a mix of these, like some would be monologue, some would be interview, or how is it? Or can you actually mix, or you
mix
just stick to one format?
No, so you mix it depending on the content. So what happened was that, like I said, 2 people dropped off my episodes. So I did the monologue with tips and tricks, 2 episodes in a row. Otherwise, I interview someone about... So I did a 4-part series because I had a 40-minute conversation with this person and broke it up. He wrote a book on being laid off. And I'm like reaching out to different kinds of people doing different things. So if they don't work out, I do a monologue. Some people do monologues because, like in America, for instance, they spend 40 minutes with their life story. So you have this Joe Rogan, who actually is a multi-millionaire podcaster, who's really all about comedy and him only. It's a one-way conversation. So it depends on your content and how you want to play it. You can even have multiple guests. So you have a monologue for 5 minutes, and then you go into a segment with guests, and you come back and you just speak. You could do anything. That's the versatility of the medium.
And you said maximum, the time that you said, it should be around, say, 20 minutes.
I like 20 minutes. So the global average is 38 minutes. But if you're doing a weekly one, you don't want to spend time editing too much. So you put out 20. If you're doing it bi-weekly, it can be 20 up to 60. It depends on how good your content is. But, attention span starts going down. Like for instance, I can't listen to Goop or Roadcaster beyond the beginning. I go for my run. Half an hour I've listened, I've come back, I've lost the end. Because people's attention span also matters.
Correct. Thank you.
Shiv, would you call the 5 or 7 minute podcasts also kind of micro learning that we did? It can also be something like that, right?
I love those. And actually, microlearning can be done as podcasts because, again, you're catering to different kinds, right? Your visual, auditory, and that kind of encapsulates the entire gamut of how people will learn. So, the other measure of to both your questions of podcast length is if you understand your audience in the commute time. Because a lot of people listen to podcasts on their commute. So if you can figure out the average commute in your target audience, your length also gets fixed. And 5 to 7 is great because you have a lesson, a takeaway, and a call to action.
Okay, thanks.
Sonata, which is not nice. I should play some music. But now, over to everyone else. And yeah, if there are any questions, I'm available on email. And I'm available now if you want to continue.
I have just one last question.
Lovely.
Sorry for
you. More questions.
Right. So basically, what scared me when I talk about even video version or even audio version is editing part, and it plays the major role in even putting a video or for a podcast. So like video editing, we can reach out to any editor. So podcast also, is it like possible, or is it easy to do it on your own?
It's easy to do on your own, but if you don't want to spend time doing it, it's not that expensive. So you have folks who will edit for about $3,000 to $5,000 because it's kind of, depending on the length and what you're asking for. If you're hiring an editor, what I would say is record about 3-4 episodes, and usme hi 5,000 mein kar do. I also offer a package for corporations because obviously they don't know, but it's very simple actually. When you look at Audacity or if you look at those, they allow you to bring it and then you just take out the ums and ahs and things like that. But hire someone, and the easiest way to do it is just get a whole lot together and make it commercially viable for yourself. And I gathered there a lot because I remember someone from England wanted me to do an edit on theirs, and they had hired someone in Andheri to do it for them. But then they wanted me to do a high-end thing, and it got very complicated. But very interesting. He's getting all of it done there, and he's an Indian who does a podcast on AI and auto. And all of it is edited by the person, and he puts it out.
Well,
yeah. Video editing, again, I love, but video editing is more complicated than audio editing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And if you make a goof up, you can't cut it.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I stopped doing interviews, because the editing part really scares me, and even if I give it to somebody, it's a pain. So I stopped doing that. Yeah.
Which is why audio is easier. Because with video, it's very difficult to cut out all the things. With audio, no one's watched. You can just quickly put it together and it seems nicer.
Absolutely. Right. Again, thank you so much.
Say, Ali, do a podcast. Yes, please.
I'll talk to you later about it. Maybe I'll take your service.
Done.
Give us some voice tips that we can use at what point. A little bit.
So mainly, I think the main thing is when you're podcasting, your voice gets very amplified on a microphone. It's to drop it down a few octaves. So I'll tell you, my voiceovers were terrible when I was 20, 21 and 1995. I wasn't allowed to do them. And taken years of then producers stepping into the voiceover booth and saying, lower it, bring it down an octave, speak from the diaphragm, speak slowly. And I did a whole episode on this, is breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. Because the moment you give yourself space in your mouth, you go and ah. But if you don't give yourself space and you breathe in and you say something, you're saying it with purpose. And therefore, it's more free-flowing and not compromised. And just use your microphone as a friend. View it as a friend. And when you're doing a voiceover, think about the people who are listening to it. And just visualize. So if it's Meenal's little kindergarten kids, you have to go and say, hi, how are you doing there? No, sorry, just kidding. So essentially lower your pitch and be much slower. And I learned this the hard way. In the old days, we used to do voiceovers on TV going, and we're like, slow down. People need to hear you. So really slow it down.
Wonderful, thanks. For a person like me, my voice just doesn't go up octaves. So I don't know.
No, but yours is a great voice. It's very laid back.
Yeah, very laid back. But I don't know if it can, something like that can create a good podcast.
It can.
So
because it's just your content and how you tell your story. How you do your trainings, you can do that in a podcast. Pregnant pauses. No one said anything. Continue.
That's a cheeky reply.
Okay, can I, if there's time, one small question.
Yeah.
Okay. Shivraj, what would be some advice for somebody being me here, but I'm quietly projecting it, but somebody battling with maybe two different ideas, which are probably both dear to me, but I'm not able to figure out which one to go. What are some good questions to ask yourself to filter and sort of, distill and say, okay, I think this is the one I should be going with?
So one is your audience matters.
Okay.
So rather than your why, so you've got your why and you've got your two ideas. If you can identify your audience, and this is something we were made to do by Riti, and we didn't do a very good job, but identify your audience and who you're speaking to and which is a priority first, and then go with that. Or you can have both ideas and have an overarching theme for your podcast, and you can play week by week on it, which is what I do.
That's a nice thought. I hadn't thought of that. Okay. All right. I'm going to mull over it and I will reach out to you.
Think of an overarching idea that links them both.
Hmm.
Make that your podcast, and you can keep dabbling between the two.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I shall
That's
think
what I
about
do.
that. Yeah, that's a nice idea actually.
I'm a
But
fence
I'll have
sitter.
I will and you can see you're talking to one. But I will try and connect the dots and I shall reach out to you.
Absolutely.
Maybe that'll be your coaching practice.
Lovely. I have to get practice. I haven't practiced. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
I have another question. I'm sorry, I'm asking.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, there's this trend in the on the LinkedIn, so maybe I could say that people would be interviewing people. Like, we have lots of talk shows, and then it's a video version, and simultaneously they would produce an audio version also, like podcast. So, like, how do we do that? Could you just guide on that?
So, if you record on Zoom, for instance, if you go on Zoom, I tried it. You have a audio track also that gets recorded. So you have all these online extractors that extract audio from video. You can extract the audio also and do that. In fact, just this client who I'm talking to is disastrous because they decided to take my advice and go with their ad agency to do the first podcast. They did a Zoom with two fabulous women engineers, and it's a complete mess because the quality wasn't good and the guy didn't know how to ask questions. So now I'm sitting here transcribing it saying, I'll rescue it because these are very important people and the sound quality isn't good. So if you're doing video and audio, make sure that when you're recording on video platforms, record audio and video separately if you can. Because extracting it reduces the, what you call the loss, the quality,
So
the
since
clarity.
you're saying that we should not be using Zoom, and if we have to do both simultaneously, which are the platforms we can use?
So, in fact, Zencastr that I was referring to, all of them are very clever. What they've got now is the option to view video and record audio, record video, and record just audio. And so they're fabulous because your video is good, and because it's a dedicated VoIP, you get really good sound. So it's not like a mass thing, but like Zoom is, which is an open platform. So the Zencastr offers you a free version with a few limitations, and then you can pay as well. Then the paid one gives you post-production also. I don't know what that means.
Wow. Maybe connecting or something.
No, also then takes it and helps you edit it and all.
Oh, wow.
I haven't tried that because I like editing.
Zencastr.
Zencastr. Zencastr without the E at the end. I thought my batch was going to grill me. Everyone's quiet.
Sure, we did. We'll do that offline.
Only Anju and Meenal did. Where are the others who promised
Shiv,
to
I
ask
have
me?
so many questions. I cannot express everything here. So, Bharti here. Okay. I'm not on video, sorry.
I'm doing that intentionally.
I know that. All right. So we'll reach out to you personally. You've got one person at least to pay off for the coaching session. Okay. Booked. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Shiv. Thanks a lot.
Lovely. It was fun. I got to do this. Thank you.
Great session, guys. Let's give him a big hand for doing this for us. So patient and answering all our questions.
Seriously.
Great, Shiv. Privileged to have you here.
Thank you for giving me the platform.
No.
Riti, we can do what Kaushik does. Tofa kabul.
Yeah, we've been doing that since yesterday. Every session. So yes, guys, let's do this for Shiv. Thank you.
Yes, Shiv. Tofa kabul karo.
And I listened to a bit of Kaushik's episode also today.
Great, yeah.
Nice, interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiv.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Shiv. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you very much, Shiv.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, Shiv, you can drop in your LinkedIn if you want here,
yeah.
and people can connect with you. I think you'll get people to give you paid assignments.
Money makes the world go round. Wait, I have to find it
One
now.
conversion is for sure no. Everyone else will follow. Don't
But
worry.
I'm a stalker, so a lot of people are already on my LinkedIn in this session, from this session. But remember, you told us 50 to 70 we have to add every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've been stalking people. Amy and all probably be like, who's this guy? Like, hello?
I think we're all connected there, Shiv.
I'm trying to find it now. I'm so bad at this. Sorry. Found it. I'm cut pasting it.
I think we are connected, Shiv.
Absolutely, we are. I stalked everyone. Anyone who was connected to the ILA, I was like,